I'm Dr. Cody Rall, a U.S. Navy trained psychiatrist who has been using and testing neurotechnology wearables for over 10 years now. Today we have a very special guest, Ariel Garten, the co-founder of Interaxon, which creates the Muse Headband. And after all these years of working with and using the Muse Headband, it was such a blast to sit down in person and ask her all kinds of questions about the latest offerings of Muse, to include their biometrics, peak alpha, and brain recharge score, and how to optimize those scores in your own life. And I also got a unique perspective that I thought you might enjoy, which is a rare behind the scenes look at what it's like to work at Muse and what they've been able to find by deploying tens of thousands of headbands all across the world and getting data with user permission to make scientific discoveries and deliver that knowledge to you, the user, within the Muse app. I think at the end of the interview, I might have made her cry a little bit.
Okay, I'm gonna cry.
I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did and learn a lot from it. Ariel Garten from Interaxon, the maker of Muse. It's such an honor to be sitting across from you tonight.
Oh, Cody, it's amazing to be here in person with you.
Yeah, we had a great week at CES here in Las Vegas, and there's just so much going on in neurotechnology, but also in brain health. So I'm really excited to talk to you about that.
Great. Yeah, let's deep dive into brain health.
Yeah, Muse is, co-founder of Muse, has been around for over a decade now and such a frontline innovator in brain health. I have so many questions, but one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about was your perspective of starting back, I think in 2014 is when the first Muse Headband came out. What is it like seeing CES and the fact that there's a neurotech event now and all these new brain health metrics that are coming out? What is that like for you after being in the industry for as long as you have?
It's incredibly gratifying. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've been too early for way too long. Mm-hmm. Back in the beginning, I would be like, do you know you could interact with the world with your brain? And people would look at me like I was crazy. And then eventually they'd be like, oh yeah, like that thing I saw in 60 Minutes. And then I'd be like, we make this thing called Muse. And people are like, what? And then eventually they'd be like, oh yeah, I've heard of that. And now they're like, oh yeah, I have one and I use it all the time. So it really is like the time has come. It's really kind of a coalescence of a lot of people who've been working in this industry for the last decade, finally being able to not only bring their products out, but have a market that understands that these tools are useful and applicable in our daily lives. I think the traditional way of looking at Muse data, at least for the past 5 to 10 years, was looking at these frequency bands and the graph, the time band graphs. I remember people were posting them online and trying to do interpretations, and it was great. It generated a lot of discussion, but there wasn't cold hard data to go off of. And I think that what's really exciting right now is that Muse is coming out with a lot of metrics that are more reproducible over time, and you can see how they change an individual person and compare between individuals. Like, what is all this new data that's coming out that we can use now with the Muse? Awesome question. So brain health is something that we've been aiming at for a long time. We know that when you meditate well, when you sleep well, you improve your brain health. And so we've been very focused on both what are the interventions that you can do for your brain health, as well as how do you go ahead and measure it. And measuring your sleep is one way to measure your brain health. Measuring your calm score, which is what we traditionally have in Muse, is another way to measure your brain health. So how long were you able to sustain your focused attention? How many birds did you get? As funny as that metric is, people love it, and it means how long were you able to maintain focused attention on your breath for 5 seconds or more. Right. How many recoveries did you get? And that means how many times did your mind wander away? You noticed that your mind was wandering, and you exerted your cognitive control to be able to return your attention to your breath. You know, that's another important metric of your brain health, your flexibility, your ability to notice your own mind and react and choose what you do with it. And now we have a whole new suite of metrics coming out, including brain recharge and the alpha peak score. And these are things that really show you what your overall brain health is, both moment by moment, because your alpha peak frequency changes a little bit day by day, as well as what is the general trend in your brain. Alpha peak is something that has been known to be correlated with brain age and with your brain's ability to react and respond more effectively.
So alpha peak is a really interesting metric. Could you actually explain and actually I explained, I think Mind Monitor was the third-party app that people were using. And you're talking about the column scores on the actual Muse apps.
Yes.
Now we're progressing to peak alpha. Could you explain what peak alpha actually is as far as like the data analysis goes?
Totally.
Yeah.
So we all know that your brain has a range of frequencies at every moment, from delta down at like 1.5 hertz all the way up through gamma. And at any point in time, you have a range of brain activity. Depending on what you're doing in that moment, your brain coalesces into different frequency bands. And that is throughout your entire head. So in sleep, it's a very unique state because you have an extraordinary amount of delta activity. And when your brain comes together in this slow, deep rhythm, it's able to synchronize your entire brain. It's a beautiful thing that happens. It allows for intercommunication between different areas of your brain. Kind of everyone literally is in the same beat. Mm-hmm. When we're awake, our brain activity is all over the map of the head. But we do see coalescing in different parts at different moments. So if you're thinking about something, you have increased your amount of beta activity. If you're anxiously thinking about something, you have more high beta activity. And if you are in a calm, relaxed, focused state, you have an increase in alpha activity. Alpha activity falls into the bands of usually 8 to 12 hertz is generally how we define alpha. There are a few different ways to think about it, but that's the standard one. And you can kind of think of alpha as the refresh rate of your brain. So when you look at a screen and it's flashing at 60 hertz per second, it's a good refresh rate. You're not seeing anything looking weird and janky. But if you start to slow the refresh rate of your screen, you start to see stuff kind of fall apart because it's not all moving as smoothly as you would expect. Mm-hmm. So when you look at your alpha peak frequency, so there's two things that we talk about in frequency. One is the amplitude, so what the amount of power that you have at any moment in time. And the other is the frequency itself. So you might have an alpha peak frequency at, call it 9 hertz. And then within that 9 hertz, you could have a high power of 9 hertz. So lots of your brain is coming together at that 9 hertz, or you could have a low power. Not much of your brain's at that 9 hertz. And there's kind of no right answer. Everybody's brain is different, and that's okay. Our brain is doing an extraordinary amount of processing at any moment in time, and it really is like an orchestra. And at any point in time, you have different parts of it playing. The violins are playing, the trombones, the drums are doing their beat. And when everybody's playing together in the same rhythm, then you can start to see like a crescendo in that rhythm, and it feels good and it's working together effectively. Mm-hmm. And that rhythm is the frequency. And the amount of volume that you have is the amplitude. So when more things are playing together at the same time, you're going to get more volume, and you're going to get something that sounds nice, that works together, that's harmonious. Now, this is just an analogy, so we can only take the metaphor so far. But when you think about your alpha waves, when you have more of your brain all coming together in this sort of synchronous experience, greater amplitude, greater volume in your alpha, then your brain is probably working together in a way that is efficient. So lots of parts of it aren't going in different directions and wasting a lot of energy. So it is an increased efficiency of your brain. And it's probably all of your resources are gathered and directed in a similar place.
What do you think that looks like in a person that has all their brainwave frequencies synced up, or in a healthy brain? Because the way that I imagine it is that they're present, they're kind of quick, they can think on their feet, their memory recall is good, their working memory is good. Are these all the things that you would expect from someone that has a high peak alpha frequency and is working with a healthy brain?
So let's step back for another second. Mm-hmm. And let's look at what the data shows us. So when we look at peak alpha, what we see is that as people age, their alpha peak frequency decreases. So when you're young, you have a high alpha peak frequency. And then as you age, we looked at our database, and like decade by decade, you see a decrease in alpha peak frequency. myself, 10 years ago, my alpha peak frequency was higher than it is now. My alpha peak frequency now is 10.5, which is still like, I'm 45.
Yeah.
So it's a high.
I think higher than my normal was around like 10.1. So you're doing better than I am.
Been meditating a lot.
Yeah.
But even so, it has decreased over the last decade. And as we look at the brain on average decade by decade, you can see a decrease to the point where when you're in your 60s, 70s, 80s, you start to see it decrease into the 8s, maybe even to the 7s.
Yeah, wow.
And if you think of it from the idea of the refresh rate of the brain, as you're aging, your brain is slowing down. Your brain is, less able to come together quickly in this rhythm in which everything is synced.
Yeah.
So a brain that is, a peak alpha is lower may look like somebody who is slower, has a little bit more of a sense of confusion, isn't sharp and on the ball, maybe their eyesight and their hearing is not working as effectively, because all these organs are also controlled by our brain, which then generates these brain waves. So, the brain waves are sort of like the indication of what's going on inside of the brain and how well it's all working together.
Well, that's all frightening. So what can we do to, because longevity movement is so big right now, everybody's so focused on improving the health of their bodies. How can we improve the health of our brains, or at least maintain the health of our brains over time?
So it turns out, good news, there's lots that you can do to maintain the health of your brain. And a lot of the same things that we do for our brains are the same things we do for our bodies. Mm-hmm. So, good news, you're getting a twofer. As you're working out at the gym for your body, as you're eating well, you're also doing well for your brain. So our brain is composed of cells, and those cells are being fed by veins and arteries. And so the same things that we want to do to keep our heart healthy, make sure those veins and arteries do not get clogged with saturated fats, that they are, not overly stressed with high blood pressure. These same things help our brain. When you have a clot in your brain or excessive blood pressure in your brain, these leads to things like stroke.
Yeah.
So making sure that we are eating well, which means low saturated fats, making sure you're eating all your green vegetables, getting lots of nutrients, because those nutrients and micro and macronutrients feed your brain. Mm-hmm. So all of your B vitamins, leafy vegetables, vitamin K, all the things that you've heard over and over again, you simply need to do them. That also means exercising, because exercising increases brain-derived neurotropic factor. It reduces inflammation significantly. So exercise, both moderate exercise, like walking at least 30 minutes a day, as well as more intense exercise, like 2 or 3 times a week, an hour of good either aerobics, cardio, weightlifting, whatever you like to do, just make sure you do it intensely for a period of time. Even if it's only 10 minutes at a time and get some good HIIT in there, you're doing well for your body and your brain.
Yeah, I wonder if there's any research between aerobic and weightlifting yet on brain health. I haven't seen anything making the distinction.
That's a good question. I haven't yet seen it either.
Yeah.
But a mixer is always the best. Mm-hmm. And once you're doing your weightlifting, you're still working your heart. You're still getting good cardio in there. Mm-hmm. But best to mix it up, best to keep your heart pumping in all the different ways and different types of exercise, massage your body in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I did a recent trip to Paris in October to go see some artists that were using brain imaging to project their thoughts into images. It was really neat. But one of the things that I paid for was jet lag when I got back. And that was right around the time I was starting to regularly measure my peak alpha measurement. And my peak alpha just plummeted as I had this jet lag. And I was able to watch it slowly come back up to regular levels over the course of 2 weeks. So I noticed that sleep is a huge thing that plays into this. What do we know about sleep and how it affects both peak alpha and overall brain health?
Sure. Okay, cool. Fun fact. We did a study looking at our overall database, and we saw that we could identify people's brain age based on 2 things. One was their peak alpha frequency. That was well correlated, but even better correlated to brain age, or rather to chronological age, was your sleep spindles in N2 sleep. So what your sleep spindles look like, it's actually quite clearly correlated with your biological age, and hopefully a correlation that you can turn back by getting better sleep, and therefore improving your overall brain health. So that, like, fun fact aside, sleep is incredibly important for both our brain and our body, for reducing inflammation, for getting your immune system to work well. You've probably heard what almost seems too fantastical to be true, that by sleeping we clear out toxins from our brain and reduce the chance of Alzheimer's. Turns out to actually be true. You have this system in your brain called the glymph system. Like your body has the lymph system, your brain has the glymph system, and it is the system of kind of the plumbing of the brain. Right. And as you sleep, it clearing out amyloid beta plaques, amongst other things.
Yeah, so how does that play into, I think that Muse is releasing a brain recharge score that I'm really excited about as well. Is that based on sleep, or does it incorporate other things as well?
So the brain recharge score also incorporates a lot of alpha, because it turns out that alpha is a really good determinant of the brain, as well as some other metrics, which we can talk about in a future episode.
Sure. So that's really exciting. We've got peak alpha, we've got brain recharge score, we've got the Muse meditation scores. What I've been impressed about with Interaxon over the years is how you and your team continue to innovate year after year. What does that look like behind the scenes in Interaxon? Is there like a weekly journal meeting? Is there a weekly data review? How is this research being incorporated into the data that you're getting from thousands of headsets and actually end up and do these awesome metrics that you guys have on the headband?
Oh my God, working at Interaxon is so much fun.
Yeah.
So Chris Amony, my co-founder, is really the driving force behind the technological innovation. He's just extraordinarily brilliant. And, the joke is you say an idea like, wouldn't it be great if, and next weekend Chris has made it. Even when we're all like, no, it can't possibly fit into the roadmap. No, we can't do that. Like, we don't have the manpower. We don't have this. He's built it by the next weekend. And so it's really a place where we are able to, we have to be extremely disciplined because we have a ton of responsibility on our hands. We have a lot of people to serve. We have a lot of, things that absolutely have to work 100% perfectly. We're dealing with very important data and very important feedback that you're giving to somebody about their brain and body. So it has to be accurate. It has to be very, very well validated. On the other hand, we also have the kind of opportunity and the liberty to say, I wish this existed.
Yeah.
I think we can build it. And that is we're constantly in the, oh my God, there's 50 things we want to build and we can only build 3 of them. And I wish we can build this crazy awesome thing. And 2.5 years later, it's been made. The thing that we dreamt of years ago, we actually created. So it's an amazing culture of a lot of kind of programmatic rigor. So do we have weekly meetings? Yes. We have our PMO, which is our management meeting where we look at the projects that we have. Every project is very well scoped out. Everybody knows exactly what they need to do on that project. And at the same time, we have a lot of fun ideas that get brought in, and also a lot of fun ideas that get brought in from our community and our research partners. Because no matter how well planned we are, we then have a study that comes in that says, hey, we want to look at 100 kids with autism, can we please have a kid's headband? And although that's not on the roadmap, all of a sudden, I go, hey, I think we can do that if we shorten this and we move this here. And all of a sudden, we're making a kid's headband.
Yeah, and when you get an idea and want to take a look at data that is coming from headbands, obviously this is coming from people that have agreed to share their data. What does that look like? Are you able to just query the database for certain metrics that you're looking for, or what's that process look like?
So we have an amazing team in our research. So we have our research and development team, and then we have our developers who are doing the app development. In our R&D team are folks that are PhD neuroscience with a background usually in signal processing. We have a good machine learning team. And so these are the guys, no gals at the moment, unfortunately, but so I'm sorry about that. Although our head of hardware is female, we had lots of fun female. Actually, our CTO is also female. On the R&D team, it is currently just guys. Okay. So we have an amazing group of guys, including Maurice and David Baum and Arvind, who are building our brain models. And so the process of querying the database is not a simple one. They've gone through years and years of work of organizing and managing the data, finding the tags and the relationships between it, building the models, and then, running a model now is much faster than it used to be, but it's still, it's a multi-week or a month process to say, hey, we want to look at this thing.
It's so amazing because I think that I saw a statistic that the most EEG sensors out there is interaxon in human history. So
I have not seen that statistic, but I believe it to be true.
Someone said it to be true. And
I think that's absolutely true. So we have 500,000, at least 500,000 headsets out in the world, probably more at this point. And I think that is more than any other consumer neurotechnology. It's definitely more than any other consumer neurotechnology company. So yes.
Yeah. So you look at that, and if you look at the way that studies are done, you have your N, number of subjects. And of course, you guys don't have like a 3280 lead cap of EEG sensors on someone. It's, less sensors, less data, but you do make up for the fact that you have so many of them out there and able to see things that other researchers really don't have access to, like this whole age range of people that are using it. What are some findings that you feel like have come out of that opportunity to look at such a large number of data sets that Interaxon really has actually discovered for the first time in human history? I would imagine peak alpha has some nuances there that has never been seen before.
Totally. So the very first paper that was published on that was, I think, back in 2015, 2016, the work was done with us and McMaster University. And that was our very first look at peak alpha. And there we looked at 5,000 data sets, which at that point was a lot. At this point is nothing. We looked at 5,000 data sets from probably 18 to 90, and we saw the change in trend decade by decade. It was the first that it was ever reported upon. And then we put out a paper in 2024 that is called Do Try This at Home. And it's looking at the metric I referred to earlier, which is chronological age, and identifying what aspects are most closely correlated. And the number one correlation really was the sleep spindles within sleep. And that had never been reported on before either.
Yeah.
So, those are just small amounts of insights, but we've been able to see differences in anxiety between males and females. We've been able to see changes in the brain over the course of the day. And so there's a lot of information that you can pull out when you are able to look at this kind of mass data.
We were at Neurotech session at CES I mentioned earlier, and I think it was you that was mentioning that there's so much inner variability between a person's brain in the same day, between different people. And that's one of the reasons why neurotech and neuroscience in general, as far as looking at brainwaves, has been somewhat limited until now, where we have like these large data sets. We have machine learning that's able to be a little bit more flexible with the data. Where do you see this going in the next 2 to 5 years about our capabilities of using EEG in this way?
Oh, it's completely amazing. So as well as kind of having our tool out in the wild with people using it, we also have partnerships with dozens and dozens and dozens of labs. So there have been over 200 papers published using Muse, well over. I personally know of 100 other studies that are currently in process. Half of them I'm working directly with the researchers. The other half, I have no idea who they are. They're just out and doing the work. So within that, we're able to work with our research partners to build far more complex data sets. So there are currently probably 4 studies, at least in Alzheimer's running, some with people with Alzheimer's, others with mild cognitive decline. Another study with a Canadian group looking at individuals who have a familial likelihood of Alzheimer's, but that they themselves are not yet showing symptoms. And along with the EEG data that we're providing. So we're providing headsets, and they're going out to all of these participants, and the researchers are crunching all of the data, not just the EEG, but also the blood markers, the PET scans, the lumbar punctures, to be able to correlate all of the characteristics of Alzheimer's and age-related cognitive decline with the EEG and the other biomarkers. And so from there, that's just one group of studies. There's another group of studies in Parkinson's. There's several studies running with Parkinson's patients with their implants on and off and seeing how they sleep. 2 other studies running with Parkinson's patients using Muse as an intervention, a meditation intervention, to see if it can improve their Parkinson's outcomes. Multiple autism studies. So, all of these allow us to see not just the normal brain, but also the brain as it progresses through disease, and from there be able to pull back and say, okay, well, where is the beginning of these indications of disease, and what are the ways that we can start to track them in the brain? So by working with our research partners, we're able to see not just, the whole healthy brain as it ages, but also the brain as it begins to degrade. And through that, find the through lines and the points where we begin to identify how that degradation happens and how we can indicate to people. And then ideally find the ways that we are able to help stave it off. That's the long-term project. But
it's unbelievable. I mean, it's like really got the potential to totally reshape the way that medicine is done. It doesn't seem that long ago where I was just defending Muse on YouTube. Like, it really works, guys. It actually gets real brain data. They're like, no, that thing can't work. It's just a toy. And I'm just like, no, this has so much potential. Not to get too personal, but I mean, what has that been like what has that been like for you as a founder, and just seeing it go through all these different stages and then get to the point where it's actually having such a profound impact on the way that people are actually looking at brain health and brain research?
Okay, I'm going to cry. Yeah, I'm quite choked up. It was always the goal. The goal was to build something that would help people, and that's why we started with meditation. And the line with Chris, our third co-founder, Trevor, and myself was, we don't know if this is going to work, but if it gets more people to meditate, at least we know we're doing something good.
Right.
We're not sure that this technology works, but we're going to use it for meditation and people will be meditating. And so, that's good for the world. We can feel good about that. Mm-hmm. Turns out that it really does work and it really does help lots of people to learn to meditate. And so, even just that was such a important goal for us when we stood back and said, how can we make the world a better place? It is helping people shut down the thoughts that they have in their own mind that they're not good enough, that, their existence sucks because they have a conversation inside of their own heads that they cannot control and that makes their life feel really sucky, when it may not be, a conversation that may be misaligned from reality. And so we hoped that by getting people to meditate, we could do our ever so infinitesimally tiny part in helping some people quiet their mind and find more calm and peace and be able to, reframe their own narratives. And at the same time, we knew it was cool for neuroscience. We knew it was going to be important to change the way that we access the brain. But we never imagined that it would actually succeed at this scale.
Yeah. And you and your team are just getting started.
Yeah. I mean, as I say that, my stomach is dropping. It's like I never imagined that it would have been this successful at achieving, I was going to say the goal, but what is the goal? The goal is a funny word because it's the goal is for it to do as much good as possible.
Yeah.
And it is, doing good, helping people sleep better. And to me, the goal is, one, how do we make the individual person's life better? Just how does life suck less for someone? And then 2, how do we create greater understanding that's then going to make the life better on a larger scale? And so if, we've contributed to that in some small way in the world of the brain, and it seems like we are, it's kind of overwhelming to me.
Yeah. Do you think that mission of the group and the company is what has sustained the company over the years to get through? I'm sure there's been better times than others, to move towards this goal of just being useful for society and helpful.
Yeah, totally. I mean, as a company, we have people who we're very passionate about meditation, and, times are tough, but it's like we have a mission, and that mission is to help people meditate. And many of the people inside the company had been transformed by meditation themselves. And they're like, yes, I care about this. And as we've expanded, then into sleep, and now more broadly able to really tackle brain health, the mission continues to resonate deeply with people. Like, we work crazy hours. There's also the irony of meditation, what was at one point, seen as a meditation company, working so hard and working so many hours, and having to remind ourselves to find the balance and take a break and take a beat. But we're all incredibly driven to do this thing.
Well, I've just been flabbergasted by all the progress that Muse has made over the years, and it's such a privilege to be sitting across from you and talking about this, and really looking forward to what Muse has to offer over the next couple of years. So I appreciate you stopping by, Ariel.
Oh, so my joy and my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.